For centuries, the human being believed to live on a firm ground. Religion gave purpose, reason offered order, and morality marked the path. But Nietzsche saw what no one wanted to accept. That ground was sinking. God has died, he wrote, not to provoke, but to describe the fall of everything that gave meaning. The world continued functioning, but without faith, without center, without direction. Since then, humanity seeks support in ideas that only disguise the emptiness. Nietzsche did not offer comfort. He launched a warning. Living demands looking at the abyss without looking away. That warning became the most dangerous philosophy in history. Can a civilization survive when it loses the sense of its own life? After the silence, when the world stopped having a support. When Nietzsche pronounces God has died, he does not celebrate or provoke. He observes a fact that was already occurring. The churches remained open, the prayers continued, the sacred words circulated, but the power of those structures had been exhausted. People repeated the ancient gestures, although their meaning no longer moved the heart. The world kept walking, but the direction that previously guided it had lost strength. That transformation had been brewing slowly. Science began to explain what previously belonged to mystery. Reason occupied the place of faith. History stopped being a path toward a predicted end and became a sequence of causes. Each advance brought clarity but also stripped life of its center. The universe became intelligible and at the same time vulnerable. Everything continued functioning, although the purpose dissolved in the clarity of knowledge. Nietzsche observes this process with the precision of someone who detects a crack before the collapse. What previously sustained the value of things had vanished, and the human being continued acting as if it still existed. In that tension arises nihilism, a form of life that preserves the words of the past but without the fire that sustained them. Morality, truth, justice continue being pronounced, although their root is no longer alive. The everyday advances, but the depth is extinguished. Nihilism manifests itself as a deceptive calm. People produce, work, compete, fulfill objectives, but they do everything with a hollow echo. Goals are replaced without conviction. What yesterday was sacred today is discarded without guilt. The energy continues, but the direction has been lost. Nietzsche describes that sensation as air without oxygen. One breathes, although nothing renews the blood. The entire culture breathes that air. The philosopher does not detect a visible chaos, but a silent erosion. Instead of rebellion, indifference appears. When everything has the same value, nothing weighs. Decisions become light, judgment dissolves, life settles. That comfort does not bring relief but numbness. Existence slides without extreme pain but also without height. Civilization remains standing but with an empty gaze. In this panorama, people seek new points of support. Some find them in ideologies that promise structure, others in routine, in consumption, in constant noise. The impulse to fill the void becomes an urgency. Anything that offers direction, even if it is illusory, is adopted as salvation. That need for support keeps the machinery alive, although it lacks deep meaning. Nietzsche warns that the danger is not in the loss of the ancient God, but in the way in which culture responds to that absence. When the foundation is destroyed and nothing is created to replace it, humanity is not liberated, it remains suspended. The ground becomes fragile, and in that fragility dependency germinates. The strongest voices are not those of thought, but those of comfort. Order becomes a commodity, meaning is rented. Modernity advances in that contradiction. It proclaims itself free, but remains tied to inherited mechanisms. Each value is repeated by custom, without the emotion that justified it. Morality is maintained as an automatic reflection. The language of duty and of good remains in use, although it no longer springs from a living faith. Civilization acts by inertia, like a body that continues moving after the heart has stopped. Nietzsche situates himself in front of that scene with a surgical gaze. He does not seek to restore the past or offer comfort. His gesture consists of forcing one to look at the whole, without disguise or evasion, facing the fact that the ancient cultural support has disappeared. The task is not to fill the void with new fictions, but to understand its dimension. Only by recognizing it, the human being can decide what to create on that terrain. Nihilism, for him, is not rejection of life, but exhaustion of its impulse, an existence that preserves the gestures of the past without the passion that originated them. fulfilling rules without believing in them, repeating values without feeling them, obeying by reflex. It is a form of cultural survival where the soul has lost density, an era that fears vertigo and avoids risk, although with it also loses the possibility of height. When thinking is no longer enough, the modern mirage that promised to save everything. When the old center collapsed and God stopped occupying the place that had sustained culture for centuries, it did not take long before something tried to occupy that vacuum. It was not a new myth nor a new faith. It was reason. Silent, sure of itself, convinced that it could do the job better than any ancient god. Modernity bet everything on that idea. If there was no longer a superior order dictating the meaning of life, then the human being thought that they could build one alone, with logic, with science, with calculation. Reason began to present itself not as a tool, but as a complete replacement, as if thinking correctly were enough to live well. Nietzsche observes this turn without enthusiasm. He does not see it as a liberation, but as a dangerous substitution. The problem is not using reason. The problem appears when it is asked for something it cannot give. Reason serves to measure, order, compare, explain, but it does not create values. It does not say why something matters. It only says how it works. For a time, this new center seemed to work. The world became more predictable, more controllable. Systems, norms, institutions were built. Everything began to revolve around the useful, the efficient, the functional. The question was no longer what has meaning, but what serves, and that reassured many. But Nietzsche detects the crack from the beginning. When reason becomes an absolute guide, it stops being a tool and becomes a cage. It begins to demand that everything be justifiable, demonstrable, reasonable. What does not fit stays out. Passion is suspected, instinct is repressed. What cannot be explained is discarded. In that climate, the human being does not become more free. They become more uniform. They begin to think, feel, and act within margins that are increasingly narrow. Difference makes one uncomfortable. The exceptional bothers. Greatness becomes suspicious because it is not easily replicable or controllable. Here appears another pillar of this false solution. The idea of the majority. If there is no longer a superior truth, then it is decided by quantity. What more people accept becomes a norm. What benefits the greatest number becomes correct. Equality is installed as an unquestionable value, not as a starting point, but as a forced result. Nietzsche does not attack common people. He does not despise people for being people. His criticism is directed at the logic that converts the mass into the supreme criterion. When quantity rules, excellence gets in the way. The exceptional remains leveled. The distinct is flattened. The best is not promoted. What does not stand out too much is promoted. Reason applied in this way does not elevate the human being. It settles them. It builds systems where no one falls very low, but also no one can climb too high. Everything becomes manageable, predictable, safe, and profoundly mediocre. In the name of order, heights are sacrificed. In the name of equality, difference is punished. In the name of progress, risk is eliminated. Life is organized, but it loses intensity. It becomes correct, but not powerful. Nietzsche sees in this a greater danger than the religious chaos of the past, because here there is no faith that sustains nor myth that inspires. There are only norms, calculations, and consensus. The individual no longer obeys God, but neither do they govern themselves. They obey impersonal systems that no one questions because they seem reasonable. When reason is made absolute, it can justify anything. It has no direction of its own. It serves as much to build as to subject. It does not distinguish between creating and dominating. It only optimizes. For that reason, Nietzsche observes with distrust how this mentality can derive into rigid, closed structures, obsessed with imposing a single correct way of living. This is not about concrete politics or flags. It is about a deeper logic. The idea that if something is rational, then it must be imposed. That if a system works, then it is legitimate. That if the majority accepts it, then it is true. At that point, reason stops liberating and starts crushing. It becomes an authority without a face. There are no longer gods, but there are unquestionable truths. There are no longer sacred dogmas, but there are norms that cannot be challenged without staying out. Nietzsche understands that this way of thinking does not eliminate nihilism. It administers it. It disguises it. Life continues without a deep meaning, but now it is organized so that no one notices it too much. Time is filled with occupations, the void with entertainment, the lack of purpose with routines. The modern human being becomes efficient but hollow, capable of explaining the world but incapable of affirming it. They know how things work, but not why to live them. Reason gives them comfort, but it does not give weight to existence. That is why Nietzsche insists, neither God nor reason can fulfill the same role. One collapsed, the other was never designed to sustain an entire life. To believe the opposite is to fall into an elegant trap, well lit but equally empty. Modernity did not resolve the problem that the death of the sacred left, it only covered it with systems. And those systems, in the end, produced the same effect. A human being domesticated, predictable, integrated, but incapable of creating something that has not been previously authorized. The morality that sickened the human being, guilt, resentment, and obedience. Nietzsche does not begin this attack from a theory nor from an abstract system. He observes the concrete human being that arises after centuries of morality. He looks at their posture before life, their relationship with desire, their way of judging themselves. What he finds is not strength but restraint. It is not affirmation but caution. A human type that learned to watch themselves before acting and to suspect that which springs up spontaneously. This morality is not born from full, secure, or creative individuals. It arises from an opposite experience. It appears in those who could not impose themselves in the real world, in those who did not manage to affirm themselves through vital force, creation, or direct action. From there, another path is built. Instead of competing, one judges. Instead of growing, one redefines value. Instead of transforming one's own condition, one transforms the meaning of what is good and what is bad. Resentment occupies a central place in this process. It does not manifest as open rage nor as direct violence. It accumulates slowly. It observes the strong, the secure, the one who moves with naturalness in life. Incapable of reaching them, it turns them into a guilty party. That which it cannot live becomes suspicious. Strength is transformed into danger, vitality into threat, difference into something morally incorrect. With time, this inversion of values consolidates. Weakness begins to present itself as virtue, renunciation as moral superiority, obedience as a sign of nobility. Suffering stops being something that one wants to overcome and starts being something that is glorified. Morality does not eliminate pain, it legitimizes it. It gives it a meaning that allows one to endure it without transforming it. The body is one of the first territories conquered by this system. The body feels before thinking. It desires without asking for reasons. It reacts without consulting norms. For that reason it becomes uncomfortable. It is watched, it is disciplined, it is loaded with guilt. The body stops being an ally and becomes a source of temptation that must be controlled. Instinct no longer guides, it interferes. This process does not need external violence. It works from within. The individual learns to look at themselves with suspicion. They evaluate each impulse before allowing it. They ask themselves if it is okay to feel what they feel, if it is correct to want what they want. That constant doubt erodes spontaneity. Life stops flowing and begins to justify itself. Each desire needs an excuse. Each affirmation requires permission. Nietzsche observes that religion fulfills a structural function here, not because of faith in itself, but because of the human type it produces. A being that learns to glorify renunciation, to distrust pleasure, to accept the negation of present life in exchange for a promise that always remains outside of this world. Daily existence is lived as something provisional, as an error that must be corrected later. Morality becomes effective because it presents itself as something elevated. It is not imposed as punishment, it is internalized as conscience. The individual no longer needs to be watched from outside. They watch themselves. They accuse themselves before being accused. They stop themselves before being stopped. Obedience becomes automatic. Domestication is no longer perceived as imposition but as personal choice. This system needs constant enemies to sustain itself. For that reason it points to desire, to pride, to instinct, to the body. Everything that does not submit must be suspicious. Everything that affirms life without asking permission must be contained. Morality does not seek to understand those forces, it seeks to weaken them. And it does so without noise, without direct confrontation, through socially accepted values. With the passing of time, this mechanism stops affecting only the individual and begins to model entire cultures. Societies that distrust talent, communities that punish difference, systems that prefer equality rather than excellence. Everything that stands out becomes uncomfortable. Everything that breaks the average generates rejection. Guilt becomes the most effective tool of control. It does not need visible punishments. It acts from within. The individual feels bad for standing out, for enjoying, for affirming themselves. Joy generates suspicion. Success makes one uncomfortable. Fullness is lived with caution. Something internal warns that going too far is not prudent. Compassion within this framework stops being a transforming force. It preserves. It keeps the other in their place. It does not impel to overcome, it impels to remain. Suffering is shared, but it is not transcended. It is normalized. It becomes identity. The wound stops being something that one wants to close and starts being something that defines. Nietzsche sees in this a tired humanity, exhausted from containing itself, from justifying itself, from repressing itself. A humanity that learned to distrust its own creative energy, that no longer believes in its vital force, that prefers security rather than risk, obedience rather than creation, shelter rather than exposure. The result is a predictable, controlled, manageable human type, someone who does not feel like a slave because they believe they have chosen. That is the greatest victory of the moral system. The cage becomes invisible. The individual defends that very thing which limits them. They protect the values that reduce them. Nietzsche does not offer relief at this point. He does not propose an exit. He does not build comfort. He limits himself to showing the complete mechanism. He leaves exposed the logic that turned morality into a tool of deep domestication. The force that pushes life, the impulse that never stops. Nietzsche observed life like someone who sees an underground current that drags everything along. Behind each gesture, each form, each creature, he sensed an impulse that never ceases. Nothing alive remains still. Even what seems immobile is seeking to grow, extend, affirm itself. That silent pressure that crosses the world is, for him, the deepest law of existence. That energy does not come from a divinity, nor from a conscious human will. It is prior to any thought. It is felt in the sap that rises through the tree, in the animal that hunts, in the human being who creates. What beats in all of them is the same force that pushes from within, that wants more intensity, more space, more life. When Nietzsche calls it will to power, he does not refer to the desire to command or to subject. He speaks of the need to expand. Everything that exists tends to deploy its form with more vigor. It is not about destroying, but about growing. Life advances by affirmation, by excess, by overflow. That which stops pushing withers. This law is recognized in the simplest movements. A seed opens the earth to come out. A fish goes up the current. An artist paints because something internal demands him to do it. There is no calculation nor moral purpose. There is impulse. The power of which Nietzsche speaks is that invisible current that crosses matter and that converts chaos into form. The philosopher had read Schopenhauer and Darwin, but he perceived something that they had not seen. Living is not simply conserving oneself, nor competing, nor surviving the strongest. Living is increasing. It is wanting to be more than what one already is. For that reason, life produces art, science, language, music, exploration. They are distinct expressions of the same ascending force. The human being does not stay outside of this law. Each time they imagine, invent, work, or transform their environment, they are obeying that natural pressure that moves them to overcome limits. When they stop doing it, they go out. For that reason, Nietzsche looked at creators with fascination, not as moral heroes, but as bodies crossed by the same energy that makes a storm break out. The vital impulse does not understand balance. It launches toward the new even when there are no guarantees. Comfort stops, risk feeds. Each resistance becomes fuel. For that reason, life does not flee from conflict, it needs it. In the effort to overcome friction, it finds its highest form. In art, this will show itself naked. The painter who cannot leave the canvas, the musician who seeks an impossible note, the writer who rewrites for years, all obey the same force. They do not seek glory nor approval. They seek to free themselves from the excess that inhabits them. Creating becomes a way to survive one's own intensity. Also, science is born from that same pulse. There is no serenity in one who explores the unknown. There is hunger. Curiosity that pushes to cross borders. Discovery is not planned, it is pursued. Truth is not reached by method but by impulse. Human thought, for Nietzsche, is another way in which life affirms itself. The power of which he speaks is not moral nor political. It is creative energy. It can take the form of construction, of conquest, of art, or of thought. Its sense depends on how it is channeled. In some it becomes creativity, in others, domination. But the motor is the same, the need to expand one's own force. When that current is blocked, the result is decadence. The impulse turns inward and rots. From there arise guilt, resentment, the morality that condemns life. Repressed power does not disappear, it poisons itself. The spirit that does not create begins to judge. What previously constructed begins to negate. Healthy life, on the other hand, spends energy without fear. It launches itself. It knows that growing hurts, that each advance demands wear. But it also understands that pain does not destroy, it molds. Nothing valuable is born from repose. Movement generates form, stillness, decomposition. Nietzsche saw nature as a school of that constant push. In the sun that burns without purpose, in the sea that hits without rest, in the mountain that rises without reason. There was the perfect metaphor of his thought. Existence as pure expansion. There is no imposed sense, only the force of being more. Each being embodies that law in its own way. In some it appears as creation, in others as struggle, in others as curiosity. The form varies, the energy is the same. Whoever understands it stops seeking comfort and begins to live with intensity. They understand that life does not need justification, only space to deploy itself. The will to power does not promise harmony, it produces clashes, tensions, excesses. But in those clashes, greatness is brewed. What resists becomes stronger. What avoids friction goes out. For that reason, Nietzsche considered that tragedy was not an accident, but an essential part of growth. This force has no final goal. Each overcoming opens another. There is no arrival, only transformation. What today rises, tomorrow pushes again from another place. Life turns in cycles of ascent and fall, but the movement never ceases. That continuity is what keeps the world awake. The will to power is not a theory. It is the pulse that beats under everything that exists. It manifests itself in creation and in destruction, in love and in ambition, in curiosity and in fury. Each form of life is an experiment of that energy that wants to test its limits. Nietzsche does not invite to understand it, he invites to feel it, to recognize it in oneself, in what moves the hands, the words, the decisions. The body knows it before the mind. It perceives it when something inside asks to move, do, build, advance. That sensation of push is the trace of the real. The world, seen from this force, stops seeming like an ordered place. It is a field of living tensions. Each being tries to affirm its existence within that flow. Life does not ask permission, it pushes. Each second in millions of places, something is born, grows, transforms, burns. That is the silent law that governs everything that breathes. It has no morality, it has no purpose, it has no end, only movement. Nietzsche calls it will to power because it is the closest name he found to describe the indomable. The force that sustains the universe and that in the human being can become art, in thought or in destiny. The emergence of the Übermensch, the figure that breaks the known world. The world had remained without direction. The old certainties dissolved, but something new began to move under the surface. Nietzsche observes that agitation like someone who hears a tremor before the explosion. In that terrain, where the ruins of God and reason still smoke, an impulse appears that does not seek refuge, an energy that decides to create instead of obeying. That impulse is the birth of the Übermensch, the figure that does not expect meaning. He manufactures it. Nietzsche feels it coming from the mountain. There, where the echoes of the multitude do not reach, the spirit transforms. There is no ceremony nor revelation, only a process that unfolds like life itself. Thought begins heavy, loaded with inheritances, with mandates, with duties. Then it becomes fierce and breaks its bonds. At the end it becomes a child, free, creator, innocent. 3 moments that are not symbols but gestures of a real transformation. The camel represents the one who endures. It accepts the burdens of morality, the weight of what has been learned, the mandates of the past. It learns silence, resistance, discipline. It walks in the desert with all the weight of the world on its back. Nietzsche does not despise it. He understands that whoever has never carried anything will not know how to build. The spirit needs that journey of fatigue before daring to let go. When the load becomes unbearable, the spirit changes form. Then the lion appears, and with it the voice that roars and destroys. The lion no longer wants to owe, it wants to want. With its strength it tears down the walls of obedience. It faces the idols that the camel venerated and turns them into dust. The roar does not ask permission, it cuts with tradition. But it is still negation, pure energy that does not know where to go. The desert now fills with noise, with struggle, with savage affirmation. From that violence something unexpected is born. The child, not the one who ignores, but the one who invents. Innocence becomes creative power. The child plays with the world, does not interpret it. Everything starts again. There is no debt to the past, nor fear of the future. In that game, real freedom appears, that of creating without a model. The spirit has passed from weight to destruction, and from destruction to creation. That is the genealogy of whoever dares to be more than human. The Übermensch does not preach, he lives. He does not need masses nor temples. His existence is a silent demonstration. He does not command, he radiates. His strength does not crush, it transforms. It is a form of power that expands like light or fire. Upon touching, it changes what it reaches, but it also consumes itself. That combustion is his way of being in the world. Nietzsche sees in the artist, in the scientist, in the creator, distinct incarnations of that same fire. Society looks at him with distrust. The multitude always fears the one who steps aside. The Übermensch walks alone, not out of contempt but out of necessity. Solitude allows him to listen to his own pulse, the internal voice that replaces the dead gods. In that distance he finds his power. Each step he takes marks a new border. Where the rest see an abyss, he sees possibility. His relationship with life is physical. He does not contemplate, he acts. He creates, destroys, creates again. Everything he touches he converts into form. In his gaze, chaos is not an enemy, it is raw material. What for others is ruin, for him is fertile territory. He lives on the edge, and that edge keeps him awake. Nietzsche says that only whoever has had chaos within can give birth to a star. The Übermensch is that star born from confusion. His freedom is not comfort, it is vertigo. He does not seek security nor rest. He knows that meaning is not found, it is forged. For that reason he lives between risk and invention. Instead of asking for answers, he produces paths. His work is not measured by utility nor by morality. His measure is the intensity with which he lives, and that intensity separates him from the rest. The majority fears the fire that he needs. The power of the Übermensch has nothing to do with dominating. It is an interior movement that pushes toward excellence. When he paints, when he writes, when he creates, that force becomes visible. The same occurs in whoever perfects their trade, whoever raises something that did not exist. Each act of creation is an affirmation of being. That is his morality, to grow, expand, multiply life. Art becomes his natural terrain. Not decorative art, but that which transforms the one who does it and the one who looks at it. In that creation there is sacrifice. Behind each work is the will to power that reinvents itself. The Nietzschean artist does not seek fame, he seeks intensity. Each page, each note, each stroke is a way to survive the void that the death of God left. The Übermensch lives within time but does not belong to it. His vision transcends fashions, ideologies, or systems. He does not need to promise a future because his existence is already a rupture. He represents the possibility of a human being who does not expect redemption, who does not want heaven nor absolution. Entire life becomes his stage and his work. There is no other judge than himself. Nietzsche warns that few will endure that weight. The majority prefers the rest of the known. But whoever dares to walk on that tightrope between the animal and the creator feels a freedom that no herd offers. The fall is possible, but the flight is too. Living in balance over the abyss demands a courage that is not taught. It is only discovered when there is no turning back. The Übermensch does not seek to destroy the weak nor subject others. He elevates whoever can follow him. He invites growth, not domination. His mission is to ignite the spark in other spirits, not to impose his fire. Each authentic act, each sincere creation prolongs his existence. Nietzsche sees in him the continuity of life when everything seemed exhausted. Upon observing this figure, one understands why Nietzsche considered it dangerous. Not for being violent, but for being free. Nothing stops it, nothing limits it. In a world that seeks uniformity, the individual who reinvents themselves is a threat. Their mere presence dismantles the moral, political, or religious systems that need obedience. Faced with order, he offers movement. Faced with dogma, creation. Faced with fear, affirmation. The Übermensch is the testimony that humanity is not finished. It is the reminder that evolution did not stop in the body, but continues in the spirit. Each generation can approach him, but none can reach him completely. It is a horizon, not a destination. His existence pushes forward everything that lives. At the end, Nietzsche leaves his image suspended. There is no cult nor statue, only a call to whoever listens. There, where thought is exhausted, where meaning dissolves, the Übermensch appears as pure act. He does not come to promise eternity. He comes to demonstrate that life, when assumed fully, does not need justification. That is his silent revolution, that of the man who decides to be a creator in a world that still fears to create. Living dangerously, the philosophy that demands the entire body. Nietzsche contemplates existence as a test that no dogma can relieve. There is no heaven to reward, nor hell to punish. Only one same day that repeats itself over and over again, identical until the last gesture. It is the idea of the eternal return. Everything that has occurred will occur again, infinite times. Each instant that the human being lives is condemned to repeat itself without end. That vision does not intend to comfort, but to measure the weight of life. Whoever can look at it face to face and say yes, demonstrates that their existence is worth eternity. The scene is radical. Imagine a thought that presents itself like a demon in the middle of the night and whispers, "This that you live now, with each joy and each wound, will happen again 1 and 1,000 times." That phrase divides the spirit. Some sink in horror, others feel the vertigo of affirmation. The eternal return is not a belief, it is a mirror. It reflects how much strength each individual has to accept the world just as it is, without wanting to change it. From there, Nietzsche formulates his challenge, to love destiny, not to tolerate it, to love it. Amor fati, the love of the necessary, learning to see what happens, loss, failure, illness, as part of one same beauty. There is no rebellion possible against what occurs, only the possibility of transforming it into affirmation. The philosopher writes in The Gay Science, "I want to learn more and more to see the necessary of things as the beautiful. Thus, I will be one of those who make things beautiful." That phrase condenses the final test, looking at the inevitable and saying thank you. That gaze is not born from optimism, but from courage. The man who loves his destiny does not expect explanation nor justice. He lives like one who dances on a terrain that can open at any moment. That dance defines the attitude of Nietzsche before existence, living dangerously, not seeking shelters but facing the open sea. In Ecce Homo he describes the life of the thinker as a continuous explosion. I am dynamite. His philosophy does not build temples, it makes those that remain explode. The dangerous life does not glorify imprudence, it celebrates intensity. It means pushing experience to its limits without moral anesthesia nor fear of pain. Existence becomes a testing field where each instant claims a decision. Whoever wavers, sinks. Whoever affirms, rises. Nietzsche sees in that struggle the measure of interior strength. He who can say yes to the eternal return does not need religion nor salvation. He has already reached the highest form of affirmation. The amor fati transforms misfortune into matter of art. There is no lament in the strong spirit, there is composition. Each loss becomes rhythm, each blow, color. The Nietzschean creator does not flee from suffering, he uses it as a chisel. Tragedy does not destroy him, it sharpens him. For that reason, the philosopher compares existence with an aesthetic work. The artist does not erase the pain, he orders it within a form that transcends it. Acceptance is not resignation, it is style. That style demands health, but not the one that avoids risk, but the one that converts it into strength. Nietzsche calls it great health, a vitality capable of containing the tragic without decomposing. Illness, exhaustion, isolation are part of the laboratory where that health is forged. In that forge, the body and thought mix. There is no separation between feeling and thinking. The idea is born from the muscle, the will from the pulse. Each affirmation is paid with real blood. For that reason, his philosophy is not for everyone. The majority needs comfort, promise, community. It needs to believe that pain has meaning. Nietzsche observes that need with compassion, but also with distance. He knows that only a few endure the weight of the eternal return without collapsing. They are those who can live without forgiveness nor hope, those who love the world even when it falls apart. To those few Zarathustra speaks when he says, "I teach you the overman. Man is something that must be overcome." The test is simple in appearance and almost impossible in practice, imagining that everything one has lived, even the most humiliating, will return eternally. If upon thinking it one trembles, one has not yet learned to live. If upon thinking it one smiles, one has reached total affirmation. Nietzsche does not seek for everyone to pass that test. He warns that the world would maintain itself in balance if only a few endure it. The rest need walls, rules, beliefs. The free spirit does not. In Ecce Homo he writes with the serenity of one who has already understood it. The thought of the eternal return marks the highest form of affirmation that can be conceived. It is not about accepting destiny, but about desiring it. Desiring that everything return, even suffering. Desiring that life in its totality repeat itself. That sacred madness separates the one who survives from the one who lives. The one who survives waits for the end. The one who lives recreates it each day. That attitude has a price. Living dangerously implies solitude, incomprehension, sometimes destruction. Nietzsche knows it. His body cracks while his thought reaches its most luminous point. But that fragility does not contradict his message. It confirms it. The mind that endures chaos does not need saviors. Each heartbeat becomes testimony, each instant an eternity. The eternal return converts existence into a continuous judgment. There is no tribunal outside of time. The judge is the instant itself. What one does, thinks, or feels repeats itself without ceasing. Each decision weighs as if it were already condemned to be eternal. From there arises the hardest ethics that has ever been imagined, acting in a way that one wants to repeat everything. Whoever manages to live like that does not need religion. He suffices with the intensity of his own affirmation. Life then becomes an experiment. Each day measures the power of the spirit to love its destiny. Each failure reveals if the soul continues willing to say yes. Nietzsche calls that state great affirmation, a fire that burns even in defeat. The weak protect themselves with theories, the strong with creation. Where some seek comfort, others seek form. There where the majority asks for redemption, the philosopher writes, "I want everything to return. It is the cry of one who no longer fears time." The philosophy of Nietzsche is not offered as a remedy. It is dynamite directed against every illusion of salvation. The thinker recognizes himself as the architect of an earthquake. Each word of his destabilizes what seemed solid. But he does not destroy for pleasure. He opens space. He wants to see what remains standing when everything collapses. What resists the explosion will be what is really alive. In that scenario, the human being who dares to live without comfort becomes a creator. Not because he dominates the world, but because he sustains it. Accepting the eternal return is accepting the infinity of effort. It means waking up each day as if everything began again, with the same intensity, with the same will of form. There is no rest in that vision, but there is fullness. Nietzsche does not leave a message of peace, he leaves a challenge. His voice does not calm, it shakes. It invites to look at life without veils, to dance on the edge of the abyss. At the end, thought becomes a flare. Living dangerously is the only way to honor existence. Everything else is flight. That is the last image of his philosophy. A man who smiles before the inevitable and says with fierce gratitude, yes.